All right, so you guys got it. We are in a series. This is the last night of our series on subject to change. Who remembers the first night? What was the theme of the first night? Go ahead. So we talked about terms and conditions, that's right. And we talked about how terms and conditions are likely to change at any time without any given notice, right? And we said that life changes, but God doesn't. That was the theme. Life changes, but God doesn't. And last week we talked about those RIP moments. Remember those moments that come in like a freight train and knock us on our butts. But the good news was what? Life changes, God doesn't. So you guys seeing a theme here? What do you think tonight's theme is going to be? Close. So we talked about life changes, God doesn't, first week. Second week was life changes, but God doesn't. So what do you think tonight's going to be, Decker? Life changes, but God doesn't. No, it's not. Sorry, I set you up there. Just kidding, it's not. Wrong. Tonight's theme is God can change the way you see change. So we set you up on purpose. So that's awesome. I'm glad you got onto that, though. So check this out. Before we get too deep into that, God can change the way we see change. I want to look at a few pictures. First off, let's see this first picture. So when you look at this picture, what do you see? A man. Which way is this guy looking? Is he facing you or is he looking to the right? You see both? Kind of creepy, huh? The first time I saw these, it creeped me out. What do you think? So, do you guys see it? Do you guys see him facing you? And then do you also see him facing that direction? Okay. You don't see it? Okay, kind of. All right. So there's two ways to see this picture. Next slide.
Oh, it's a duck and a bunny.
Okay. All right, two ways to see it, right? Who sees the duck? Who sees the duck? You guys see the duck? Who sees the bunny? You guys see the bunny? See them both? Now you see it? What did you see first? Okay, so you saw the duck first. Who saw the duck first? Who saw the bunny first? Yeah, I've got to say, I think I saw the duck first on this one. But when you hear the word bunny, you can see that there's a second way to see this. Next. And so this one creeps me out too. What do you see? A lady walking and a man's face. You guys see it? I think actually, I would have thought that she was more sitting down, but now that you say that, I see her walking. She's walking through the park. So do you guys see that? You guys see, who sees the lady walking? Do you not see the lady walking? Okay, see the tree and the lady next to it? All right. You don't see that? And then, can you guys see the face? Do you see the face now? What? You thought it was a boat? Okay, I can kind of see the boat. But I'm going to go with there's two ways to see this one, not three. Okay, so here's the thing. There really can be two different ways to see things, right? So I want you to hold on to that thought for a second. And before we get too deep, I want to tell you, obviously, a little bit about my story. Most of you know it. Most of you know that up until September of this year, I was a police officer. I've been a police officer for 20 years. Most of you guys, none of them. After I said it, I got myself. None of you guys were born. In March 20th, 1998, I started my career in the Manteca Police Department. 3 months later, I got married. So, woo! That was good, yeah. Woo! Got married. Yeah. Somebody didn't know that a while back. Who was it? There was like, you guys are married? I didn't get it. It was a rooted group. We spent how many weeks with this rooted group and nobody knew that we were married? That was weird. Anyways, so we had been married for 20 years as well. So my entire adult life, I started my job at 22, and I really wasn't an adult yet. So for my entire adult life, there's two things that I knew. It was marriage and being a police officer. And we've talked about change before, right? I don't like change. In that 20 years, our scenery changed. We moved houses. We had a couple of kids. But that was just like scenery stuff. We still were married, and I was still a cop. Even as a police officer, I had the opportunity to change within the department. I got to do other special assignments. I got to do things here and there. But I was still a police officer. And here's the thing. It was subtle change. The little things were okay with me. But the problem was the big things that really scared me. And then, as you all know, 2 months and 8 days ago, God had finished his work in me. Okay, maybe he didn't finish his work in me, but he's still working on me. But what happened is he really started pushing me to make a change. He made me make a change in my life. I knew my whole life that he wanted me to go into full-time ministry, but I had resisted it because the deeper I got into being a police officer, and the longer we had been married, the more comfortable I got, the harder that change was. And I can tell you, I didn't want to change. I was telling God, no. I was on the outside saying things like, well, it's just not the right time. Or, maybe later. Or, I'll do this as a retirement thing. But I kept telling God, no. And the reason I told God no, and I can look back and I can tell you this, guys, because I'm still in this spot. I can tell you that the reason I told God no is because I was afraid. I was afraid of that change. I was afraid of taking that step. I was afraid of the unknown. And now we've talked a lot about change in the past, right? We know that some here, you said you loved it. So who loves change? We've talked about this. Some of you love it, and some of you hate it. But check this out. We all have something in our lives. We all have something that we need to change. Some of you know what I'm talking about right off the bat. You go right in your mind to that one thing, and you think, yeah, okay, I got you, Bill. I know what you're talking about. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Even those that love change, some of you that raise your hands, those of you who love change, know that this isn't the kind of change that you want to make, even though you know it's the right thing to do. And sometimes it's difficult. It's times like this that it's difficult to do these things, to actually do what needs to be done to make that change. Sometimes it's a change on the inside. Sometimes it's the way we think about things, the way we feel about people, the way we do things. And sometimes it's a change that needs to happen on the outside. Maybe it's our friends. Maybe it's the way we respond to our family. Starting to understand why we laid the foundation over the last few weeks that life changes, but God doesn't. That's the foundation we need to start with. That even though we need to maybe make these changes, we don't need to worry about God changing on this course as well. So why is it difficult to make the changes in our lives that we know that we need to make? What do you think? Why is it difficult to make these changes that we know we need to make? Yell it out. Come on, guys. What do you got?
Because we're comfortable.
Comfortable? What else? Decker, you said something. Thanks for your honesty. What was the question? Why is it difficult to make those changes in our life that we know we need to make? Fear. I gave you that one. That was easy, right? Fear, comfort, what else? All right. You too? You and Decker? Being silly? Oh, okay. So here's the deal. For some of us, we're afraid to fail. And I can tell you straight up, that was me. That is still me. I'm afraid to fail. Still is. I'm afraid of giving up all that I had, all that comfort that I had in doing that job. And I really enjoyed it. I did a good job at it. I rose in the ranks, and I had special assignments because I did well. They liked me there. I made good money. But I gave it up for something I'd never done before. And I don't know how this is going to turn out. It's fear. Some of us are afraid. For some of us, we're afraid to stand out. We're afraid to stand out of the crowd. A lot of this, it may just be easier for us to just take that B, right? The B average is better than the C average, which is what I got, but different story. It's just easier. You can be the second chair in band, or you can be the understudy. You don't have to stand out. We want to care, but not too much. We like the attention, but we don't necessarily want to be in the spotlight all the time. We don't want to be seen as someone who tries too hard. And then for some of us, we don't want to seem judgmental. We've talked about this one before. As when you label yourself as a Christian, people right away think that you think things about them, right? So we don't want to come across as judgmental. If we start changing certain behaviors or attitudes, we're worried that people will think that we think we're too good for them because they still haven't changed, right? And finally, we don't attempt change because it seems overwhelming. And there's a lot of stuff that I'm going through right now, guys, as part of this one that's overwhelming. I don't know if you guys know what that means. Like, you guys have school, homework, sports, after-school activities, part-time job, right? Anything more just seems so daunting. It seems like it's just going to be too much, too soon, too quick. It may be a little change, but it's just going to be that one thing that sends us over the top. It's that straw that breaks the camel back. Even if it's something that would be working to make your life better, it just seems like a whole lot of trouble. And for what? So today we're going to look at a passage of Scripture from the letter written by James. Anybody guess or know who James is? What's that? Yell it out. Yell. Be confident.
A disciple of Jesus.
Okay, well, technically, yes. That is kind of true. What else? Booyah! Decker's right. He is the brother of Jesus. So what does that mean, really? First off, who here has siblings? Okay. And siblings? Sadly. So you're gonna follow right on track with what I have to say. Who here would jump at the chance to front off a sibling when they're telling a lie to mom and dad? Depends on what the lie is. Oh, then they come back with a lie. Okay, so how about this though? Let's flip that around. Maybe not, but would you jump on board wholeheartedly with a sibling's lie and live out as if it were true for the rest of your life? Would you cover up for a sibling for the rest of your life? Maybe? All right. Okay, so here's the thing. Of all the people to follow Jesus, right? Of all the people that would follow Jesus, or anybody who would have a reason not to follow Jesus, it would be James, right? We talked about how the church, when it first started, the people were being persecuted because they were following what Jesus had done. Persecution means they got beat up, they got arrested, some even got killed. So if you had to make that choice of following somebody's lie or not, and if you followed that lie, you had a chance to die, what do you think? Did that maybe I'm not going to follow that lie anymore? Right? So it kind of gives credibility, first off, to Jesus' story, because James was there. He saw him from a kid all the way up to his ministry, and he knew whether he was legit or not. And he writes stories about Jesus, and he tells us about Jesus. So we can trust that what he has to say, we can learn from. So here it is. This is the letter that he wrote to a group of new Christians. It was a group of Christians in Palestine, in the area where the Jews were, the new Jewish Christians. And the cool thing about this is that this letter that we're talking about wasn't deeply theological. It wasn't one that we have to dissect by, like Pastor B come up here and really draw out the truths for us. It was very simple because it was James who grew up with Jesus, And he knew the Old Testament like the back of his hand. So he was able to do something that some of the other authors weren't able to do. He was able to give us these truths with the perspective of Jesus. Somebody called them short, challenging wisdom speeches. So there were little things that we could take a hold of, put in our pocket, and keep for another day. So, the thing that we're going to focus on is in the very first part of this chapter. And he writes, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing." So what does that mean? First off, when troubles of any kind come your way. At that time it was written, the trouble that he was talking about, the trouble that was heading to them was obviously potentially persecution, death. We talked about that, okay? But what does that look like for us? What is, in our context, does trouble look like? It's anything that takes us away from God's perfect desire or design for our life. So our troubles may be friends we hang out with. Our troubles may be things we do. It could be as simple as the places we go hang out. And even the things that we want. And we talked about this a second ago. How can these things be troubles in our lives? Because they can distract us from what God ultimately wants for us. You see, Jesus was telling his followers they needed to make a change. We talked about that. We no longer had to live by the law. You could live by grace. There was this big change. But James was encouraging them to move beyond their comfort zones. He said, have a different perspective on what we're talking about. Consider it joy when you experience trouble. Who here loves trouble? Well, some of you I know love trouble. Let me rephrase that. So on Friday I was messing around with my Jeep. Yeah, I know, Decker. I was messing around with my Jeep, and it's just what happens. You know, it's probably something I didn't need to do to my Jeep. I was fixing something, and then as I'm fixing it, something else broke. Now that's not exactly the moment in time where I'm thinking to myself, thank you, God, for making me have to go back to the store, buy some more parts, or wait for it to come in the mail. That's just not my first inkling. It's not my first inkling to go, yay! I have one more thing that I have to fix now. Consider it joy when you experience trouble. He's telling us to wait a second. He's telling us, look at it from a different perspective. Instead of getting angry, look at this as an opportunity. Hold on to that thought as well. We are all familiar with endurance, right? So we usually associate endurance with sports, athletes. Specifically for me, I think about like cross-country runners, marathon runners. That's endurance, right? Who's run a marathon here? Marathon? You are crazy. Half marathon? Full marathon? That's just nuts. Half marathon? Even a half marathon. 13.2 miles? Dang, that's nuts. Long distance runners, and that's just crazy to me. Okay, something easier. You guys all have PE, right? Who loves planks? Who loves doing planks, right? Everybody know what a plank is? It's like either push-up position or you can be on your elbows. Okay? So a lot of times we think of that as strength, right? But that can also be considered endurance. Endurance is a state of being, right? So it's that mind over matter type thing. If you don't mind the pain, it doesn't matter, right? First off, wait, there we go. I got distracted again. Imagine that. So it's the power to endure through something unpleasant. Don't you hate it when a definition uses the same word to define itself? It's a thing, a state that will help you endure an unpleasant or difficult process or situation. That's endurance. Seriously. A plank is all about putting the pain out of your mind, right? Hold it there, longer. Can you do that? Can you put the pain out of your mind? It's endurance. So when we push through the pain and struggle of any kind, pain from our troubles, pain from the change, we don't just become better at that specific thing. We develop personal endurance. See how those two relate? Personal endurance, physical endurance. Essentially, James is saying that practice makes perfect. It's an opportunity to learn to work through these things, to work these things out when they come our way. All these troubles. God can change the way you see change. When it comes to change, our tendency is to focus on the negative parts. That's me, right? That's me right off the bat. When we view change the way God does, we recognize that it's all about growth, and it can be a positive thing. Different perspective, right? James is telling them that when we trust who God is, remember, life changes. We talked about this last 2 weeks. God does it. Life changes, God does it. Which is why the Old Testament is so important for us to know. It's so important for us to know who God is. It's so important for us to understand Him, to know that He is never changing. That was a big thing we talked about last week. God is the same today, tomorrow, and forever. When we trust God, we can be sure that God is doing something in us, no matter how uncomfortable, no matter how painful the change may be. The strength you develop now will be the strength you take with you into the rest of your life. And ultimately, developing personal endurance will build and deepen your faith. So let's pray. God, we thank you so much for these ideas, this concept, these ideas of personal endurance, to meet these troubles head on with a different perspective. That it's something that can be good. It's something that can develop us and grow us into the people that you want us to be. In Jesus' name. All right, so tonight we're going to break up into two groups, kind of like we did this at the beginning. We're going to have girls on one side, boys on the other, and now you can take your chairs. Okay, so let's pot up over here, pot up over there.